You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Washington's 4th Congressional District will soon send a new face to D.C. for the first time in over a decade. Representative Dan Newhouse is retiring, and there are a slew of challengers who want to take that seat, which covers central Washington, including Yakima, the Tri-Cities, and Moses Lake. The mild-mannered Newhouse was at the center of some pretty hot controversy in the Republican Party. He was one of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach the president after an insurrection at the Capitol. Though the moderate Republican proved resilient after that vote, winning election twice against Trump-backed challengers. So the big question is, what happens after Newhouse leaves office? Over the course of this week, we're going to speak to most of the frontrunners vying to replace Newhouse in the 4th Congressional District. Joining me today is Republican State Senator Matt Boehnke. He is an Army veteran and former Kennewick City Councilman. Senator, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thanks, Levy. Thanks for having me. And it's important, I think, to share with your listeners, taking the time, and I really appreciate working with the media to make sure we get our message out about all candidates, and especially importance about building trust back in our election system. So thank you for this opportunity. It really means a lot.
So you currently represent parts of the Tri-Cities, so Kennewick and parts of Richland and Pasco, areas of Benton and Franklin County. I know it's not a super happy environment in Olympia, but why do you want to trade that for D.C., which also doesn't seem like, such a great workplace these days? Why did you choose to run for Congress, and what is your ask to voters, why they should vote for you?
Great question, because I think that's the part where you're drawn to by somebody who cares about your community, cares about your neighborhood. And it goes back to that. Coming from city of Kennewick, I truly believe is still small town America. And we all have that. When we're just really talking about how we can solve problems within our community, that's how I got started in this. And it was like, we need some common sense. We need people to get pragmatic. We need to get back to governing. And I was asked to look at this as an option. And when we were developing an idea, it was based on some of the experience I've had in the Senate and even the House. And you already mentioned the connections to city council. I believe you have to have that balance of understanding what you're going to go into to be effective as a leader. And then to be effective on day one, to know what committees you need to be on. What's the best way to represent the people that are electing you to office? And how do you govern the best way you possibly can to move that needle? Because you're right, it's an interesting time. It's a diverse time. It's a divided time. And I believe we've been through this in our history as we celebrate 250 years and even look at the celebrations from FIFA to bringing people together from across the world. We have a great country that we can showcase so many great things that a lot of times we forget that. And I'm just a grassroots kind of guy that just wants to support my team, my neighbors, and really my family in solving problems.
President Trump is a defining issue in this election. Two of your opponents have been endorsed by the president. Jared Sessler was endorsed in the last cycle. He ran an unsuccessful challenge to Dan Newhouse. Now Yakima County Commissioner Amanda McKinney is the president's pick in this election. Why do you think you were not chosen as the president's endorsement? And what is your path to winning election without it?
Great question, because I do think the sitting president and leader of a party that you're supporting and have supported for years is a big proponent of it. I think he didn't endorse me because he didn't know I was in the race, frankly. He did this early and mid-December, and I was told they were vying for that. When we were planning for the Senate session this last year, I was knee-deep into figuring out what we were going to do on Ways and Means and this millionaire tax and a lot of these things that were going on with being ranking member on energy and environment technology. How do we reduce the loads on data centers? Those issues were kind of front of mind for me at the time when all this changed and when Dan Newhouse then dropped the question of, hey, I think I'm retiring now. And then as anything, funny thing happens on the way to Congress, as they say. Then you get a lot of people in your inbox who are really encouraging you to go, hey, you need to go after this. So I tell people I still am connected. I've reached out to DC. We're still talking a lot with the Republican National Party. They're still involved in this race. They still see this as a win as Republicans moving forward, that we have strong candidates that would be supportive of the president's agenda. I voted for him 3 times, but I tell people I'm here really fighting for the 4th Congressional District endorsement. You'll see on my website and others that I have bipartisan support from labor unions all the way to local electeds, state electeds, as well as county commissioners to probably the most senators, state representatives, and even I would say city managers to mayors up and down the fourth district, because that means more to me. Getting back to you're fighting for your families, the neighbors, the people who really matter. I'm not here to win DC. I don't think that's the case. I think you should focus on what it matters here in the fourth district.
Is it accurate to say that you're kind of trying to follow more of a Newhouse mold in that it's a bit more of a centrist path? You might be able to draw in some independents and Democrats if you make it to the general. I mean, am I going too far with that assumption?
No, I believe when you're elected of the people, for the people, by the people. It didn't say R or D in it. And as a Republican who's been elected now 5 times, I go to Democrat Party meetings just like independents, just like the moderates on each side of the aisle. And I've had fundraisers in this round with a lot of them. I will take a meeting anytime, any place about any issue. And I truly believe that we need to get back to that, to where you can understand those, to where we're more aligned, I think, on these 80/20 issues that we hear about across the board. We want lower cost rates on our electricity. We want communities who are safe. We want to have water to stop droughts in our agriculture, in our communities. We want to make sure we have teams that work with the state, federal, and local levels and in Congress. How can we do that with the funding levels of an overarching plan to get back to those investments in our community? That's where the experience I have in there to provide that with the background of my national security background of being in the military as well. And if that's a moderate looking, sure. I take in a lot of people who are more far right and even far left in some cases, depending on the issue, for example. But I believed in this time when I was raised with core values of you should question authority. You should always look at where we can do better. Where can we improve not only in our policies based on merit, based on questions versus fear of a solution that we can go forward, whether it's some of the climate debate that's in our nation, forest management, things that we can do better. I've run bills on all those. So I'm not afraid or tentative or even shy away from meeting with people in downtown Seattle about climate change. What does that really mean when you're looking at monitoring and measuring greenhouse gas emissions? Is our investments actually going to make sure we can reduce those? We need to have those type of solutions based on merit, based on those decisions. And is it based on data that we're collecting? Because we're collecting a lot of data on all these issues. Is it the best data we can get? And is it not biased? Is it not areas that it's going to sway us one way or the other? We need to have a pragmatic approach to where we're governing.
Where are the areas that you support President Trump's agenda? And are there any areas where you would potentially split with the president? I'm thinking about, for example, Dan Newhouse on tariffs. He voted to break with the president on the tariffs with Canada. Are there areas where you might split with Trump?
Yeah, there's like any president, I think there's a lot of really good things going on. I'll start off with the ones I agree with. I think border security, we need to do that. He's done a great job to make sure we're vetting that. But also, we need to allow a streamlined opportunity for our farm workers. I truly believe we can do that. We can do it, and I always call it as a computer scientist and a data analytics, we could do it like a Domino's Pizza app. We have apps for everything. So why can't we streamline these things like you're applying for that citizenship, have it on an app, and we can then set aside clear guidance on where your processing is. How do we make that better? Who has your paperwork moving that forward? And what is that timeline looking? So that's the pragmatic in me. I think the energy policy is great. I think bringing energy back to America brings back jobs, has created opportunities for us to target economic development, to allow us to have that in our small communities in rural Eastern Washington, where a lot of people are seeing those jobs move somewhere else. And most of those are out of state because of our tax laws, over-regulation, or some other types of that piece. So those are some of those off the bat. I agree with Dan Newhouse in the tariffs situation as well. We have to really get to the fine-tooth comb of, are they helping certain commodities over others? And what are those global trade markets that we can work to open up? because once you know those markets close to us and they go to Brazil or another country, we're not going to get those back. It's going to take longer and harder to get those back. We want our cherries, we want our potatoes, we want to get them out through a supply chain effort that's effective and efficient the best way we possibly can.
You talked about data center development, and I'm curious to hear more on that. In July of last year, the president signed an executive order to encourage data center development. The 4th District is obviously a hotspot for data centers. Some residents have expressed frustration with the power and water usage in those data centers. You've worked in Olympia to bring more power online with small nuclear reactors. Should the federal government take a bigger role in data center construction? What kinds of potential changes do you want to see in our policy towards data centers?
I think great question. I've been a part of the co-chair on the Washington State Data Center Task Force, and even at the National Conference of State Legislators, we've been involved with the federal data center policies that have been going on the last 2 years. I would say more local control is better, that we've identified from our federal partners of sharing the data of the impacts of where water, noise, light usage, where we can permit and site these areas. And I use that similar to how we permit and site, whether it's a advanced nuclear plant or even a wind solar farm in our state. We have a great process that allows community involvement. The local control can be involved from the city and the county level. And if we can zone it out with that permitting sign, and I think we can incentivize areas that we can separate or have like a buffer zone between residential areas, between agriculture, and some of these higher commodity critical parts of our state. We have land that can be developed for data centers that I think are opportunities where we can have that mix. But it's educating our communities, making sure they have that involvement in those concerns. We're doing 4 now in the Tri-City area, and that involvement is included with what's been happening in Quincy, like you mentioned. Quincy, the mayor of Quincy, and a lot of the people I've met with love data centers. They brought a lot of that back to our community. They built a high school out there. They've reduced ratepayers, so utility costs have actually gone down. And they've worked in an innovative way to where water can be recycled in the system that helps cool down the apparatus that runs data centers, but keeps the noise down. They developed these and we've had probably one of the first ones in the nation. So these are first gen. Now we call these second gen data centers. They're increasing the ideas of these technologies, building those out to modernize them and having those inner areas. And I would do third, I have a large area of cleanup over here in Hanford. It's a big concern to us growing up here. We want to move this to a positive for our state. We have a lot of that federal land, and as a congressman, I want to leverage that land to make sure we can use it in places like data centers. Instead of in people's backyards, let's go there. Let's make them coexist with advanced nuclear so we can have those buffer zones together to be safe. We can be accountable and we can monitor in an area that we can get them on the grid and make sure we have grid reliability as well.
I just quickly, before we go, we've got about 90 seconds left. I want to circle back to immigration because it sounds like you do support, in line with how Dan Newhouse approached this issue, a streamlined path to citizenship for farm workers. But right now, there just doesn't seem to be any will in Congress to get that off the ground. It seems like most of the president's focus and the policies that have come out of this White House have been focused on enforcement, funding ICE, more immigration raids and enforcement overall. We've had a net negative migration to the United States for the first time in over 50 years. What path do you see as a member of Congress to actually getting something like a streamlined path to citizenship done, especially in this environment?
I think there's opportunities. So like one that's kind of bipartisan is we want to stop drugs in our communities. We want to stop the rising cost of crime. And in those aspects, I think can build that unity of saying, where is that coming from? Let's look at the data, where it's coming across our borders and stopping those where we can there. It's influencing and investing in areas like we did in the state where Senator Lovick and I were co-sponsoring a bill to where we can have police academies regionally throughout the state. So with his help, we had it out of Renton. He moved one up toward Everett. I have one in Pasco, and we can get more individuals to get into our law enforcement agencies to train here locally in Washington State builds out jobs, builds out community safety to go after these areas. That helps keep our communities safe. And that allows us the opportunities where when citizens have, and they will continue to, see us as a great country, we want to give them that opportunity. And when I was in the military, traveled to 40 different countries around the globe, and even in the U.S. Army, helped individuals who wanted to protect and serve our nation and serve and swear an oath to our Constitution. Allow them the pathway to citizenship the best way and the most respectful way. We're forgetting about respecting another person. And I truly believe that's been discarded in this. I think that will galvanize a lot of people in a bipartisan support. I think it gets away from politicizing an issue that we've had this kind of bipartisan effort in past. And we're moving through that to try to govern again with the respect of individuals.
State Senator Matt Boehnke, candidate to represent Washington's 4th Congressional District in Central Washington. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Libby. Appreciate the time. And thanks to all the listeners. So reach out to mattboehnke.com if you have any other questions.
And we'll continue talking to the top fundraising Congressional District 4 candidates from Central Washington all this week, except for Yakima County Commissioner Amanda McKinney, a Republican who was endorsed by President Trump. She politely declined our interview request, but said she would be open to speaking after the primary election. Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.